So up till now, we should have finished the animation part for this chapter, and the plan is to import everything into Unreal and render from there. But before we can import our animation file into Unreal, we need to have a clean rig file so we can export a FBX rig, import the FBX rig into Unreal, and then we export those animation clips and reattach them back to the rig in Unreal. And here's I'm going to show you how to do the rig cleanup to this rig that we downloaded. We just need to open this original rig file, fresh rig file. And here we need to do a little bit of rig cleanup, so to make it Unreal friendly, essentially. In short, what we need to do is take this whole root joint hierarchy out of this group so it's not connected to anything else, because Unreal doesn't support anything other than skin, cluster, and blend shape. So if there's any constraint or any IK, any business in there, we need to get rid of it before Unreal can accept it. So what we need to do first step is we need to open up the group in Outliner called main controller, and then we can find that there's a root group, and the root group contains all the joints, the bones that we need for this rig. So the first thing we need to do is select the root group, and then we press Shift and P. What it does, it would take this root group out of this whole unnecessary grouping structure and exist under the root world. And the next step, we're gonna export the mesh, and we only select the mesh we can see, and we want to export the full armor version of this rig. So we just need to switch the version into paths, and then we select all the visible geo, or we delete all the hidden geo. We want all the geos to exist under one main group, so we're gonna take all the geos in the subsequent group and move it under the first main group, because Unreal Engine is not really friendly with the multi-group structure. So it's better to have all the geo under one big group, and to have all the joint under one big group as well. Okay, this is the first step. Now we need to export this root and the geo as FBX, but before we can import this to Unreal, we need to re-import what we just exported back into Maya to do another pass of cleanup. So we just need to export this geo and joint group. Remember, we don't need the animation in FBX for now, so we just can uncheck that. And let's call it a hero T-pose raw. Okay, so in this pass, it will export everything we need for the joint and the geo. And also, because it's FBX, it comes in with the texture as well. Let's refresh our scene. Let's open a new scene and re-import the FBX we just exported. Again, this is not ready for Unreal yet. As you can see, it comes in with some curves as well, because when we export the FBX, that probably there's some constraint, some pattern constraint attached. So when we import, it will bring in those curves, and that's what we don't need. This is the second pass to clean up all this unnecessary stuff. Here's very important that when Unreal Engine read the skeleton structure, Unreal doesn't recognize anything has the replicated names. But sometimes when in the production, when doing the rig, we possibly have a duplicate rig names, such as the left fingers and the right fingers. So before we can export an Unreal friendly rig, we need to make sure that there's nothing has duplicated names. And the next step is we can just get rid of this IK system. That's what we don't need. And the second important thing is when Unreal Engine read this whole rig structure, there has to be a root joint. So whenever you have if you have the rig and whatever, you have multiple rig layer, you have to put everything into a root joint. That's actually what we saw in the gun rig, that the root joint existing always at the origin. So always put all the bombs under one root. As you can see right now we have a root joint, and right after the root joint we have the pelvis. And also I just deleted all the locators that comes in. Now what exists in the scene is only the geos and whatever the bombs driving those geos. Then we can export right now what we have as a UE Unreal Ready rig. Okay, now what we have is a UE friendly rig. Only the geo we see and only those bombs that driving the geos. Just to re-emphasize, the first thing, no duplicated names. Secondly, put a root joint before everything. And right after the root joint, there can only be one layer. And anything else you can put under pelvis, but under the root, there can only be one joint layer. So just take this as a reference when next time when you export your rig. Okay, let's go into Unreal Engine. This is a default sample scene. Let's now import the rig we just exported. The second pass cleaned up one. Okay, let's just navigate to our UE ready clean rig, not the raw rig, but the rig that has been cleaned up twice. And keep it default, should be fine. If it is the first time you do this whole process, you may not get it the first shot. And if there are any mistakes, remember to check no duplicated names and the root joint structure. And under the root there can only be one bone, and whatever else you can put under that bone. Okay, now we have some bones that not in use. It's just warning, no worry. And because we export the FBX, so it comes in with all the texture, and we should just put a default shader on top of it. So it's pretty handy. Let's go into the character to see how it's being read. Okay, the texture, the shader looks pretty good so far, and it comes in a little metallic feeling. It has a specular texture applied as well. And for mid and background shot, this texture should hold good enough. Okay, if we go to the skeleton tab, you see all the joint we have in Maya has been successfully and correctly imported into Unreal. We have the rig ready. Next step is we're gonna only export those animation clips, almost like we have the rig in Unreal, but we need to import those mocap clips from Mixamo. So when we export the animation clips, we don't really have to do the whole process like we just did. Right now, we just need to export that those bones has been animated and those bones that are driving the skin. Essentially, you only have to do that character rig import once, and after that, we only need to export each short animation bone clips and assign those bone clips onto the rig that we just created. So this is the running and the jumping animation clip we did in the previous two courses. So now we need to export this animation clip. Let's open up the main control group and look for this root structure in our rig. As you can see, we can see the root structure is here. So this is what we need to export to hold all the animations. We don't need the mesh, we just need the animations. But before we can export this root, we need to bake all the translation and the rotation animation for all the bones under this root structure. And to do that, we first check if there's any illusion filter, and secondly, to get rid of all the connections and all the constraints that might be used in this shot. So we select the root and select hierarchy. And we don't really see the channels here, we just unselect the root and reselect the root. That should give us the access to the channels. So we only bake out the translation and the rotation channel. Let's make sample as 1. Don't check Smart Bake. And select everything, select the full frame range. And especially when we export this animation clip, we'd rather to export a little bit more than we actually animate. So we have a little bit pre-roll and whatever after. We can trim it down later in Unreal later. Same thing, let's check if there's any Euler filter. Obviously we have some Euler filter, I think it's in Armor somewhere. Very easily we can just use Euler filter on the curve tab to fix that. Okay, now after we've baked the keys out, we check the Euler filter. Next step is very important. Remember how we took this root out of this whole group to move under the world? We need to do the same step. To do that, we can make sure that the root bone exists in the world space, and whatever the translation and it has is relative to the world space, not relative to the main controller. So if we move the main controller, the root might not be in the right spot if we re-import it. And again, we just need to export this root. When we export the FBX this time, we need to make sure we check the animation and bake the animation under the FBX export tab. And the whole frame range is what we have for the keys, so we just export this whole thing. Okay, let's go back to Unreal Engine. This time, let's find a place to import this animation clip. And the first thing Unreal will ask you which skeleton system you want to assign this animation to. And because we just exported and we have already prepared that T-pose rigging for Unreal, so we can just tell Unreal that this animation clip goes to this T-pose skeleton, and then this Unreal should slap them together. All the animation we just did has been successfully imported into Unreal Engine. So this is basically a workflow how to export a character rig from Maya and export the animation clips from Maya and reassign them back to the rig in Unreal. Okay, so this is how we export the animation and the character rig from Maya to Unreal. Next step, we're going to talk about how to use the same method and to export the camera from Maya into Unreal and to recreate the animation, the camera animation file we already have. In order to export the camera into Unreal, we have a couple of different ways to do it. One way is to directly export the Maya camera as FBX file and import it into Unreal sequence as keyframes. But the problem with one is first that there's a difference in the world space order between Maya and Unreal. In Maya, the world space is Y up, but in Unreal is Z up. So if we're gonna use the FBX format to do a direct export, we may have a different world space issue. Although we can fix it during the export, but it might cause future problems. And also, because once we imported the animation into Unreal, we only see the keyframes. It's gonna be an issue for us to do a version control. We don't know what version the keyframe is. So if we're gonna do a different versions of a shot, we won't be able to know what version we are looking at just by looking at the keyframes. So here we're gonna do a simple camera rig. Basically, we're gonna use the same joint system, a root joint and a local joint. But here we're gonna use a cube to represent the camera translation and the rotation. Basically, we do the same gun rig, but this time the gun geo is just a cube. And we're gonna treat this whole rigging, the root and the local, as a camera rig, and we're gonna export the whole animation in the joint as the camera animation. And in Unreal, we will attach a Unreal camera onto our local joint. So that's how we transfer our animation, just to treat the camera as a character asset as well. Okay, so let's go back to our shot. The first thing, let's just import this simple camera rig we just made. Again, it's just a root joint, and under the root joint there is one local joint, and the cube is skinned to the local joint. The cube is just for us to know where the joint is once we import it. And we're gonna use the same way we did to the character to import the simple camera rig structure into Unreal. So if we do this correctly, in Unreal we should see a cube geo, and under the skeleton tab we see a root joint and a local joint. And first thing, once we imported this whole camera rig into our shot, the first thing we need to make sure that the camera joint namespace in the shot is the same as the namespace in Unreal. So we need to delete the namespace that comes in with the file. So it reverts back to joint 1 and 2. It's identical as the ones we have in Unreal Engine. Okay, next step, we have to do a little axis conversion of our Maya camera. This is just to address the issue we mentioned before, that Maya is Y up world, but Unreal is Z up world. So we're gonna use a script to convert this camera axis. So when we export this FBX animation file, which we're gonna later assign to our camera rig on Unreal, the animation file has already been converted into a correct Unreal space. So essentially we will do a 90 degrees rotation of the camera, but we want to keep the translation and the rotation the same, identical. So we're going to use this script, which will attach in the project file as well. And now we select our original camera and add to this tab. This is the camera we want to convert, and we click create. So this script will create us a new camera that has 90 degrees difference from our original camera. And this new camera should carry the identical and proper world rotation and order that Unreal system uses. So now let's select the new camera we just created, and then we're gonna parent our camera rig joint onto this new camera so we can export the animation. So here this step is for us to get the camera movement information onto the joint, and because we have the joint in Unreal already, so as soon as we get the movement information and we export the movement information, assign, slap together with our Unreal rig, it should recreate our camera motion. So we do the same step, bake out the camera, bake out the joint movement, get rid of the filter issue, and we just simply export this joint animation. Same step, but only a simplified version of how we do the character animation export. And we export the full frame range. Okay, now let's go back to Unreal Engine. All we do here, we just treat the camera as just a simple another character rig. Let's import our camera FBX we just exported. Okay, here we'll be asked again, where do we want to assign this new animation clip to? Here in this time, we want to assign this animation clip to our camera T-pose rig. So once it's read, we can see our cubes is moving the same way as our camera is moving in Maya. So in this way we successfully exported our camera animation into Unreal. And because we use the animation clip as the camera animation, so it's very easy for us to do a version control. We can label this animation file. We can know which version this camera animation is, instead of we're just looking at a couple of keys that don't know which version that we are looking at.
Purchase genuine tutorial. Enjoy the question answering from course tutor in the long term. Join the exclusive Facebook group and learn from each other. Also, you can sign up with yihu.com. Search for the course ID. Obtain the full learning courseware, project files. Follow us on Facebook. Get closer to become a master in CG field.